Hello, and welcome to Creating Effective Figures. In this video, we'll discuss an important aspect of effective figures, the labels and legends. My name is Sunita Patterson, and I'm part of editing services in MD Anderson's Research Medical Library. Good labels and legends complement the visual presentation of data. The labels on a figure help readers understand what they're looking at. On this graph, you see axis labels and descriptive text labels. Other ways of labeling figures, depending on the type of image, are annotations with arrows or symbols, and scale bars. Figure legends provide context and details. Let's look at each of these more closely. Let's focus first on good text labels. This is a graph of birth rates over time. The y-axis label is live birth rates per 1,000 women. Very clear. The x-axis shows the years. Note that to avoid crowding, only some years are shown, with the others represented by tick marks. The individual curves represent age ranges of the mother. The curves are distinguished from each other with color, and each curve is labeled directly. When there's room, putting information on the figure itself, like this, rather than in a color key or in the figure legend, makes it easier for readers. In this figure, we have multiple similar graphs, with each one showing expression of a different gene. The authors have labeled the graphs with the names of the genes, so we can see at a glance the organization of the data. We'll look at the legend for this figure later in this video. Here are a few additional tips for the text labels on figures. If axis labels describe measurements, indicate the units. In this example of an axis label, two acceptable styles of presenting grams are shown, with a comma or with parentheses. Next, if the journal will print your figures smaller than the originals, make labeling large so that it's still readable when the figures are reduced. The final font should be no smaller than 8 points. And check the journal instructions to see if they specify what fonts to use. If none are specified, then we suggest a standard sans serif font such as Arial or Helvetica. These are very readable and recognized by all publishing software. They look cleaner than fonts like Times New Roman that have serifs, which are the little lines at the bottoms of the letters. Finally, pay attention to consistency of the text labels across all of the figures and between the figures, tables, and text. For example, it will be confusing to readers if you use two different names for the same drug, or two different abbreviations for the same disease. And it looks less polished if the manuscript isn't consistent on details such as whether there's a hyphen in MCF7 and whether a capital versus lowercase letter is used for the H in beta HCG. Finally, use a consistent style for capitalization of the axis labels and text labels on your figures. Most journals prefer the first style you see here, with only the first word of the label capitalized. Beyond text labels, for photographs and micrographs, you can use annotations to draw the reader's eye to the important features of the image. Here, in the top left image, we see examples of arrows. In the second image at top right, we see outlines of regions of interest. The third image at bottom left shows lines with labels. And the fourth image shows letter codes and symbols with a key. These examples are from an excellent article in PLOS Biology called creating clear and informative image-based figures for scientific publications. You can see the source information at the bottom of this slide. Here's an example showing both an arrow in the left image and arrowheads in the right image. Notice that there is good contrast between the white arrow and its dark background and between the black arrowheads and their light background. The legend for this figure explains what the arrow and arrowheads are pointing to. From the PLOS Biology article I mentioned before, here are examples of how to convey the scale of an image in a way that's clear and easy to see. For the scale bars, white labels are used on dark backgrounds, and black labels are used on light backgrounds. If neither works, the scale bar can be placed under the image, as in the bottom center example. Now let's talk about writing figure legends. A good legend typically includes a title that conveys the overall subject or main message of the figure, the number of patients or samples, the method and statistical tests used, and explanations of abbreviations and symbols. It's good to provide enough information in the legend that the reader can understand the figure without referring to the main text. Let's look at a couple of examples. Here's the figure that we looked at earlier. Let's break down its legend. The main figure title in bold summarizes the overall content of the figure. It shows validation of innate immune gene expression during viral persistence. There's a brief description of the methods. It mentions microarray analysis, qPCR, mRNA, the type of mice. The time points are described, explaining the abbreviations used in the x-axis labels, day 15, day 60, day 145. The number of mice per group is included. The control group is described. We see the reference gene that was used for calculation of the relative expression that's measured on the y-axis. We see the data were plotted as the mean plus or minus the standard error of the mean. And symbols are defined. The asterisks signify a p-value less than 0.05. So this legend is a nice explanation of the experiment and provides all the details needed to understand the figure without reading the main text. One more example. This is a dot plot, and the legend starts with a bold title summarizing the figure content. Platelet counts for patients with primary or secondary dengue infections. It includes the number of patients in each group. The legend then states when the data were collected. It explains that the red lines in the figure represent the median values. And it provides a p-value and the statistical test used. So this is a concise but informative legend. Thank you for viewing this video on effective figure labels and legends. For further information about scientific writing and publishing, or to request editing or a consultation with an editor, check out these resources from the Research Medical Library.